You measure twice, and you cut once. Measure twice and cut once. It is the carpenter's creed. It is what not only carpenters live by, but anybody who works with wood or metal, anybody that uses their hands to create, whether it be furniture or homes or whatever it might be. It's always wise to measure twice before you cut. So I envision Joseph having that opportunity to be in the carpenter's shop, of course, because that was his trade, and teaching this child Jesus how to use his hands and how to pick out the wood and how to measure twice before you cut. I envision Joseph doing that because, of course, isn't that what parents do? They teach their children. They teach their children values. They teach their children the craft. They teach their children how to use their hands, how to use their minds, how to use their heart, how to use their entire being. So I'm sure Joseph did the exact same thing, and he was able to do it because, as we were told in today's gospel passage, he did something prior to that, and that is he decided to dream. Something that we should all do. When we dream, incredible things can happen. Incredible things like learning lessons that I learned from a former neighbor of mine, whose name is Reuben. And Reuben lived just to the north of me here in Willmar, and I met him when I moved back here to Willmar, and he was an incredible man, still is to this very day. And why, in his garage, he had stacks and piles of wood as far as the eye could see. Reuben loved to create and to build things. He made a set of dresser drawers for every one of his children and grandchildren. So he was proud to be able to show off his stacks and piles of wood, because he would actually go down and he would go out and he would cut trees and he would dry them, and then he would, of course, cut them into the sizes that he wanted. And as I looked at all this wood, I said to Reuben, you know, if it were me, I would take half of this wood and I would put it in the dumpster, because it just looks like scraps of wood to me that have no particular use. And he smiled and he looked at me and he said, my wife tells me the same thing as you just said. But, he said, Father Steve, if you look a second time, you'll see more than a scrap of wood. If you look closer, you might just discover that in that little scrap of wood is the potential for the arm of a chair, or the front of a set of dresser drawers. But Father Steve, you have to look a second time. Just like the carpenter's creed about measuring twice, I envision Joseph not only teaching Jesus about his trade of carpentry, but I can envision Joseph in his carpenter shop with his child Jesus right alongside of him, and I envision him telling him the story of that night when he fell asleep and he allowed himself to dream. And in the dream, he heard the voice of an angel who invited Joseph and invites you and I to do the same thing that Reuben invited me to do that day in his garage. Joseph, look a second time, and you will see not something to be discarded, not someone to be divorced to, but you will see beauty. And more importantly, you will see love. And you always hold on to love. You never throw it away. Because you see, Joseph was convinced that's what he needed to do. He needed to divorce Mary quietly. Because she was a scandal. She was with child. And they were not yet married. And they were not yet sharing a home. So Joseph had to do what Joseph had to do. He had to simply discard and move on. And yet, because he allowed himself to dream, why then he hears a voice. And the voice invites him to look a second time, just like Reuben invited me to look at those piles of wood that looked like scrap heaps that needed to find a dumpster somewhere. Why, Reuben invited me, and he invites you and I, and he invites, as the angel invited Joseph in that dream to do, to look one more time. And if you look closely, you're going to see more than a scrap of wood. You're going to see the potential for the arm of a chair or the front of a set of dresser drawers. And you will see something that is beautiful. And you will see something that has potential. That's what the angel Gabriel was inviting Joseph to do. So he awakens. You see, the dream, isn't it interesting? It's the dream that awakens Joseph. What does it awaken Joseph to do? Well, to take the beam out of his own eye, his beam of judgment of Mary that he had already made, so that he could see a second time. And then he could measure twice. Because then he could discover that there was someone in front of him that was not to be discarded or to be thrown away, but rather this person, Mary, was someone who was an invitation for Joseph to love. And what does Joseph do? He awakes. And with the beam removed from his eye, and his ability to no longer judge, well, he says yes. Just like Mary did a while back to the same angel Gabriel when she was invited to become the mother of our son. So as we come to these final days of the Advent season, as we prepare for the great feast of Christmas, let us take the opportunity to spend some time dreaming. And in our dreaming, let us look a second time at the people around us, our family, our friends that we will gather with either this weekend or in the days to come, those that are in our midst. And let us look and let us discover perhaps something we haven't seen before, something that invites us to recognize beauty and potential and gifts. And let us then be awakened by our dreaming so that we might say yes, so that we might not only, like the Carpenter's Creed, measure twice and cut once, but we might look twice, so that we might love again and again and again.